number of years. Tammy Baldwin for 5 minutes.
Gentlelady is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I want to thank Chairman Conyers for the time and for your diligent work on this measure. It has been an honor and a privilege to work closely with you. Today, by passing the Local Law Enforcement Hate Crimes Prevention Act, the House has a historic opportunity to reinforce the principles of equal rights and equal protection embodied in our Constitution. Hate crimes are acts of violence motivated by prejudice and committed against individuals that end up victimizing entire groups of people. In 1968, in response to horrific hate-based violence in our country, cross burnings, lynchings, firebombings, and the like, we acted to protect people who were victimized on the basis of their race, color, religion, or national origin. Today, we strengthen our response to this form of domestic terrorism by adding protections for people targeted for violence because of their gender, disability, gender identity, or sexual orientation. We add these characteristics to the hate crimes legislation not because they deserve special protection, but because of a history and pervasive pattern of heinous, violent crimes committed against individuals because of these characteristics. Some opponents of this legislation are disseminating misinformation in order to derail this bill. But make no mistake, this legislation we pass today has been carefully crafted to protect our First Amendment rights to free speech, expression, and association. The First Amendment protects these freedoms, but it does not protect violence. This is not a hate thought bill. This is not a hate speech bill. This is a hate crimes bill that will provide needed federal resources to local law enforcement authorities when they confront violent crimes motivated by prejudice and hate. I want to share with you a few reasons why I believe the passage of this legislation is so urgently necessary. I'm thinking today of Angie Zapata, an 18-year-old transgender woman who was brutally murdered in Greenlee, Colorado last summer. Angie's killer beat her to death with his fists and a fire extinguisher when he learned that she had been born a male. Thankfully, Angie's killer was brought to justice under a state hate crimes law. But we know that with staggering frequency, those who commit similar acts of violence and murder based on hate are not. I think of Lawrence King, a 15-year-old in Oxnard, California. Larry suffered harassment from his peers and then was killed by a 14-year-old classmate because of his sexual orientation and gender identity. Americans across the country, young and old alike, must hear Congress clearly affirm that hate-based violence targeting gays, lesbians, transgender individuals, women, and people with disabilities will not be tolerated. I think today of Matthew Shepard, who was brutally attacked by his homophobic assailants and left to die on a fence in Wyoming 10 years ago. Matthew's death generated international outrage by exposing the violent nature of hate crimes and the horrific effect on the targeted community. I think of Judy Shepard, Matthew's mother, who is here with us today, still courageously advocating for the passage of this legislation more than 10 years after losing her son. The passage of the Local Law Enforcement Hate Crimes Prevention Act will not make all hate crime go away, but this bill gives state, local, and federal law enforcement authorities the necessary resources and tools to combat violent crimes based on hate and bias. Mr. Speaker, the arguments have been made, the evidence has been proffered, and sadly, the lives have been lost that more than justify the passage of this legislation. I urge my colleagues to pass this bill.
The gentlelady yields back her time. Gentleman from Texas.
Mr. Speaker, we have one remaining speaker on this side, so I'd like to ask the chairman of the Judiciary